Welcome to the place of rest, where our aim is to give you language that helps you displace the growing confusion, chaos, and dis-ease of our times. My name is Jonathan Boyce, and it's my pleasure to bring to you today's episode. In light of Mother's Day this weekend, Virginia shares some thoughts on mothers, women, and femininity. We hope you enjoy today's conversation.
Over the course of the last 10 to 12 years, I've had the privilege of working with amazing human beings. But the most complex, the most mysterious, and the most fascinating to me are always women because they're multifaceted. And one particular story comes to mind as we approach Mother's Day. And it's the beautiful face of Marissa and the beautiful story of her sweet mom who struggled with alcoholism and the impact that that had on her during her developmental years. And of course, the devastation that it brought when she passed away 7 years ago. It was horrific. As a matter of fact, that's why Marissa came to see me. Her mother, alcohol finally took its toll on her life and she passed away. And the root of bitterness, the anger, the sadness, the grief, the frustration, the shock, the anger, the resentment, the complexity of feelings and emotions that came with that whole experience for her caused an enormous amount of confusion, chaos, and dis-ease in her life. And she was desperate to put the whole thing to rest. So she came to see me. And 7 years into our pilgrimage, we'd often get to places where she needed to take a hard pause. And I encouraged it so she could go think deeply about the things we discussed and apply the principles that I had invited her to consider. And so during the course of about 7 years, I'd see her for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 months. And then we wouldn't see each other for 2, 3, 4, 5 months, and so on. But on this particular Mother's Day, I was gripped by her desire to honor the memory of her mother. And I was touched by the complexities, the complexity of what it is to be a woman, what it is to be a mother, what it is to be a daughter. And ironically, she asked me to speak about the divine feminine in honor of her mom. She decided that during this particular event where she was going to invite these significant women in her life that helped her get through the darkest moments of her life, that she wanted to bring out her mother's best china and her best tea set and celebrate the divine feminine. And she asked me if I would speak on that for a few moments. And I was gripped by the beauty, the tenderness, the sensitivity of her mother's heart and her mother's legacy and her mother's pain and her mother's shame. And I was so thankful that as we embarked on this pilgrimage of rest over the years, that Marissa and I were able to hold many complex things in our hands and celebrate the impact of the love of a mother in the life of her child. And I think that's what I wanted to talk to you a little bit about today. I often say women are emotional because they have access to a myriad of different resources that communicate complex things. And men are sensitive. Men are far more simple. It takes a lot less to keep them happy and to make them happy. But women are complex beings. And in that complexity, I think a lot gets lost in translation in how they live and often how they love. And this is a beautiful story of that. We celebrated that brunch discussing the many facets of what it is to be a woman. I hope that our listening audience can really be inspired by the story of Marissa and her sweet mother that left a legacy of love. Yes, it's messy, but life is messy. People are messy. Life's confusing. Can be confusing. But in the midst of the confusion and the chaos and the dis-ease, there's this invisible heartstring that we share with these peculiar creatures we call women that bring us into the world. And it's a beautiful thing. So I thought we could talk about that a little bit today. When you think about what it is to give life, I mean, it's a complex subject, right? It's a big question. And no, I can't do that question justice. I can't do the topics justice, but I can say this, evidenced by the brief story I just told. Good, bad, or indifferent, there's a longing. There's an invisible heartstring. I often refer to it as that we have with these complex beings in our lives that bring us into the world. When you really think about it, it's the womb of our hopes, our dreams, our fears, our passion. That's our heritage. But we're literally knit together in the womb of our mothers. And everything she's feeling and she's thinking and she's experiencing is intimately connected with what we think, feel, and experience. So Catherine Day calls it a divine love. It's a divine love, not to minimize the affection and the love that we have with our fathers, but there is an emotionality, if you will. There is a knitting together. There is a knowing, an intelligence, a knowledge, an intuition. There is something that happens in the life of that child and in the life of that mother. I remember after I had my first baby, I felt like my heart was no longer in my body. And I've since heard that expression expressed in the work of poets and writers and singers, performers. And I think it's a law of nature. There is this beautiful creature that grows inside your womb. And you're really never far from it, detached from it, or out of touch, I think, from it. And I think every mother knows what I'm talking about because you get this sense about things, this intuition about things, and you don't have language for it. Sometimes it feels like you're a little crazy. But there is a mystery. There is something divine in the relationship between a mother and a child. And case in point, here's this beautiful mother who has this beautiful girl. And they're overjoyed with this new life that came into their life. But there's a lot of unresolved confusion, chaos, and dis-ease deep in the soul of the mom. But there are complexities woven into the tapestry of our souls, specifically in this case, the mother. And the child has full knowledge and understanding of it in one way or another. Not to mention, when you begin to think of the pilgrimage of the little egg that was fertilized, being in the womb of the grandmother, you've got some really complex dynamics there. But I think that in spite of the challenges that I think come with being a human and entering into time and living, there is this divine love, this unexplainable bond with our moms. And it stays with us forever, and we pass it on to generations to come. So when something as beautiful as desiring to grow through the pain that Marissa felt growing up in an alcoholic home with a highly compromised mom, it was a beautiful thing to see the attributes of her mother displayed in her. It was a beautiful thing to study the china. There were multiple patterns of china before us. And it was just so intricate and divine. It was beautiful. It was just beautiful. It was an entire it was just quite an experience to see the daughter work through that kind of pain and grief and see and find the beauty in the ashes and the treasures that were passed on to her through the brokenness of her mother, in spite of the brokenness of her mother. And for her to get to a place to say, I'm going to honor the good that she gave me, and to celebrate, I think, the uniqueness of who her mother was. I don't know. I think there's a story in there for all of us that as we look back, what about our moms can we celebrate? What about them bears, I don't know, an imprint of the divine? We think about God as a father. The Holy Spirit really is a mom, sort of, comforter, teacher, guider, Holy Spirit comforts, guides, teaches, inspires. It's the words of wisdom, right? Represents wisdom. And then you think of the role of Jesus, if you will, this ancient metaphor of what it is to be a family, as being a sibling. There's something sacred in the heart of the Trinity, and perhaps the invisible heartstring of God, or perhaps in the invisible design of God is this invisible heartstring of the Trinity that's woven into the womb of every woman to pass on a legacy of love. It was just a phenomenal thing to witness. I'm not sure I have words for it all. There is something divine woven into the tapestry of what it is to be a woman. And not only is it divine, not only is it unbreakable, but it must have significant spiritual implications in the story of man. And I'll tell you why. Because if good is real and evil is real, there must be a very specific reason why everybody wants to be a woman, and an assault on femininity, an assault on womanhood, an assault on motherhood is always a topic of significant debate. The freedom of women, the rights of women, the nature of a woman, the essence of a woman. And I guess everybody wants to be a woman. That enough should be cause to wonder, wait a minute, why is the assault on femininity? Why is there such debate on what it is to be a woman if it was just a benign state that's relatively insignificant and all things are equal? If all things are equal, why is there so much controversy about what it is to be a woman, what it is to be a mother, what it is to be independent, what it is to be free, what it is? It's always around this hot topic of women. They need expression, they need defense, they need equality, they need all these things. And it's caused me to wonder over the years, if all things are equal, why is there so much controversy around this topic of femininity? And I believe because we have an invisible heartstring to God with a very unique role and an incredible amount of power. We should ultimately shape the character and conscience of the next generation. So if you're going to bring down a nation, you've got to assault the family. If you're going to assault the family, you're going to go after women and get them to do what? Deceive them to think they're not enough. They need more. Their role is not significant. You can hire somebody to do everything a woman does. There's all this confusion, chaos, and dis-ease around this concept of femininity. And I think it's because it's divine. It is powerful, and it has the capacity to transform the character and conscience of an entire generation. Exhibit A, Marissa, a T, honoring the beauty and the ashes of what it was to be raised by an alcoholic mother. Triumph, glory for a woman to honor another woman who caused her an enormous amount of pain. But I saw the transformation in the life of this young girl. And when she chose to honor the beauty and the ashes, the divine feminine in her mother, and the legacy of love that was preserved through something as simple and benign as China that was cherished and protected so she could pass it on to her daughter. That was a remarkable thing to witness. I wonder how many sets of china are buried in the rubble of so much pain in our own lives. And I wonder, for our listening audience, how many women shaped your life and preserved a measure of dignity in your divine and your understanding of your own femininity. And I wonder, have you ever honored those people with a tea, with a coffee, with a dinner, and publicly in front of the other 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 women that shaped your life? And so I thought this would be an opportunity to send out a brief message and a brief reminder to all of us to celebrate what is divine about our femininity. And I believe it is an invisible heartstring to God. I'm sure if we could look through a keyhole into Marissa's sweet life, and you could see her mother passed out on the couch, and you could see this little sweet 4 or 5-year-old little girl sitting on a step crying, wondering if she was going to die this time, we'd say, what a mess of a woman. Somehow in the midst of the addiction and in the midst of the pain, she passed on a legacy of love and a legacy of honor. Granted, Marissa has had to dig it out of the rubble for sure, but I do think there is an almost indescribable divine component to that relationship that causes, as children that grow up in less than perfect homes, to dig through the rubble and see what's beautiful, or see the beauty in what was passed on to us. So I wonder, in what ways have you been taught to view your emotional depth as weakness? A few application questions for us to consider that may serve us well. What was the divine shaping influence of your mother in your life? I should say, what specifically do you recall or do you consider was the divine shaping influence of your mother in your life, in spite of her limitations? Take a few minutes, perhaps, and jot those down. What is the divine feminine strength in your life? And finally, what would it look like to rest in your design as a woman and honor it and honor that divine feminine strength in others? Who in your sphere of influence comes to mind that you would like to gather and talk about this? It's obviously a very important topic. It's causing an enormous amount of confusion, chaos, and dis-ease in our nation. So I think it is a good, sound, reasonable thing to discuss. Wow. There must be something sacred and divine about femininity and what it means to be a woman, because it's a subject of so much controversy. There must be something sacred in what unites us as mothers, as women, as daughters.
We hope listening to this episode has brought you closer to experiencing the freedom of wholeness and healing. If you have questions or comments about today's episode, or for updates about R.E.S.T, please visit our Instagram or Facebook at The Place of R.E.S.T. If you would like more information about Virginia, or to support and join the cause of R.E.S.T, please go to theplaceofrest.com/donate or call 949-289-5935. Thank you for listening to Rest with Virginia Dixon. We'll see you next week.